So NBA free agency has started. Teams have made moves, trades have happened, signings, craziness. I'm a little bit behind, but I wanted to give it a little bit of time to see what moves, the Mavericks made, what other teams made in the West. So we're gonna have to dive into that a little bit. But it's actually interesting. I wrote down some things I wanted the Mavs to accomplish in free agency within the first couple of days. And let's look into that. So let's look internally first with their current roster, regardless of signing anybody like a Derek Jones Jr. or any other free agent. What I wanted them to do within their team is make Lively the starter going forward. Now, it's not gripe against Daniel Gafford. I think he's a great, high productive guy, and he'll definitely get some starts throughout the season because Lively has proven to be a little bit injury prone. I would like to see an improvement there going forward. I think he only played 52 games out of the 82 game regular season, and when he was gone early in the season, the Mavs defense struggled as they didn't really have the pieces around to elevate their defense without Lively in the lineup. And so I would like to see Lively be in that starting lineup as we look at, their plus minus. I think he was an 11.7 net rating. I think it's net rating. And Gafford is a minus 0.9. So he's a negative player, but that's not true. You can ask any Mavs player. And there's moments where Gafford makes bad mistakes, but Lively has that too. I just like the upside of Lively more as a playmaker, and especially if he can expand that 3-point game like he had in Game 3 of the NBA, or Game 4 of the NBA Finals. But that's reaching a little bit. I would like to see him take a little bit more three-pointers because I think that's another element to this team that can be expanded upon, especially because teams, or at least the Celtics, had a great chess piece move in terms of canceling out the three-point shot. And if you're able to bring the opposing or bring a big out, let's say other teams implement that and they have their center staying in the paint or their center on their four, like the Celtics did, then that's allowing, the Mavs to stretch the floor, and you got to respect the three. Hopefully at that point, if Lively can build that reputation throughout the season of being at least a 35% 3-point shooter, I would take a 33. Once you get down to a little less than 33, then you kind of, limit and you're willing to give up those shots. So that's one thing I would like for them to, change internally. Some other things I would like to see internally changed is the progression of certain players. Like I said, Lively can take take it up a couple of notches. Daniel Gafford's only 25. He could take it up. There are a lot of young guys on this roster. But the big three in terms of improvement that I want to see next season, and this is obviously wishful thinking that they can take that next step, is Derek Lively, Olivier Maxwell Prosper, Omax. He was in the G League this season. He has a 40-inch vert and can shoot 40% from the three in the G League. So hopefully that can transition. And, it's another lengthy defender for the Mavericks to implement. And also, Jaden Hardy could develop as, you saw him in the finals and throughout the regular season. He can get a bucket. He is a natural scorer. Now, for him, what I would like to see a little bit more is just more consistency and better decision making. And I think, with veterans on the team like a Dante Exum and a Kyrie, he's going to start to learn that. And if he can become the backup point guard for this team, that would be huge because it's also a youthful piece. I think he's entering the last deal of his contract, so he's also playing for a contract extension at the end of this year. So now we go into the offseason decisions. And, these are the players that I wanted the Mavs to move off of, and I wanted them to move off Tim Hardaway Jr., and they did that. So I think and they didn't do it for, a ridiculous cost in terms of giving up a first-round pick or anything like that. They gave up THJ and 2 second-round picks for Quentin Grimes, which we'll dive into a little bit later, but I thought that was a good deal. Trade him to an East team that will take his salary for 1 year, and, you get a great young defensive player in Quentin Grimes, who is coming off a down year, but you're potentially buying low as he's also entering what I've seen in my research as his last year of a contract. And he was only 4.2 against the cap. So you'll take that trade any day of the week, especially if he doesn't end up producing. You at least got off that contract for other players to, fill in that production because Tim Hardaway Jr. was unplayable in the playoffs, and he was unplayable as this team got more defensive minded because he just did not bring any defense to the table. So I think it's an upgrade if you look at it as a Tim Hardaway Jr. to Quentin Grimes. You're getting more defense, which if you're not hitting your shots and you're not defending, you're not helping this team whatsoever. And if Quentin Grimes can't hit his shots, he'll at least give this team some defensive upside. And then also, for some reason, I put Dwight Powell on this, but he's always going to be a Maverick. I would just like for them to get a potentially impactful third big. Like I said earlier with Derek Lively potentially dealing with some injuries. Gafford could deal with some injuries. And if we have a reliable guy off the bench to fill in that third big, occasionally he would play not that much, but he, for the regular season could be an impactful player. That's why I move off Powell, potentially signing a third big. So as we move on into who I want the Mavericks to sign, I did put Derek Jones Jr. as a re-sign option. Obviously, we know he is with the Clippers, and if I didn't know who they signed first and they just let him walk, I'd be like, what are we doing? What is the decision-making behind this? But the Mavs were actually able to sign Najee Marshall, who is a very similar defender. I think they're both 6'7", 6'6", and he weighs 10 more pounds, so he's a little bit bulkier, not as thin as Derek Jones Jr., but a lot less athletic. I wouldn't say a lot less, but there's definitely a gap, as Derek Jones Jr. is one of the most athletic guys in the NBA. The Mavericks signed him to a 3-year deal, $27 million. That's $9 million per year, I guess, on average. I don't know how that's necessarily going to be structured yet, but he is a better three-point shooter than Derek Jones Jr. at 39% last season. But you definitely lose that go-to defender that you can have on your team that's going to guard the best player. Najee could step up to that position or fill that role. And, before later moves happened, Mavs fans, myself included, thinking, okay, this is just, a flip of a coin or a flip of position. This guy's going to fill in Derek Jones Jr.'s spot. And that's what most people were thinking, or at least in terms of the starting lineup, he's going to be a starter now. But that obviously is not the case. Other moves I wanted them to do, I was really big on Paul George for this team. Obviously, the contract and stuff like that wasn't going to work, but I thought he could give this team huge upside because he is one of the best two-way defenders in the NBA, can knock down the catch-and-shoot three-point shot, and can get a stop on the defensive side. So I thought that was going to be huge for the Mavs if they could pull that off, but contracts and the way it works and stuff like that, it wasn't going to work, and I don't even think he wanted to come to Dallas. If it could work, maybe he did, but who knows? Some other ones, potentially trades that they could made, Andre Drummond for that third spot, or even playing a little bit. That one wasn't really going to work if you're going to keep Gafford, which they did, which I'm happy with. I'm on team keep Gafford, but KCP declined his player option and entered the free agent market, and obviously he signed, I think, a $66 million deal for 3 years with the Orlando Magic, so that's $22 million a year. The Mavs couldn't afford that. If he was the only free agent, they could afford it, but then you're losing defensive capabilities with that signing and not being able to sign a guy like Najee Marshall. So that wasn't going to work. Bruce Brown has been a rumor around. He was with the Denver Nuggets when they won their NBA championship, and now he's on Toronto. He was on Indiana, or he might be on Indiana now. No, he's on Toronto. So there were some guys like that. OG Anunoby, he declined his player option. He was potentially a free agent. He obviously re-signed, but these were more wishful thinking. Patrick Williams, Malik Monk, Buddy Hield was a potential guy. I was like, you know what? That would be a good guy because the Mavs need to upgrade their three-point shot, especially in that small forward position. But then this gets us to the biggest move the Mavericks made this season in signing Klay Thompson in a sign-and-trade deal with the Warriors and the Charlotte Hornets. They signed him for a 3-year, $50 million contract. And when I saw this, I saw rumors of 4 years, $80 million. And I was like, no. Don't sign this guy to more than 3 years. Don't pay him more than like $17.5 million. If you can get him for a deal, do it. And when I saw this, I was like, yes. I was in love with it. I could not have been more happy with the length of the contract and the size of the contract. If it doesn't work, it's tradable, but it's also leaving more room to sign other guys. They still have like $5 million left, or their MLE or something like that, to sign a backup point guard. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But this is a great deal, and I think also a great fit. Now, you can dive deeper into some analysts or more analytics on why this fit works. He's still a great 3-point shot. He struggled in his 2-point shot, so I'm not necessarily marking him as an elite finisher or even a finisher in this league anymore. But here's why I think the fit works. People are freaking out because the defense is going to, if you start Kyrie, Luka, and Klay Thompson's fallen off a little bit defensively. He's still a decent defender, and if you think of it as an addition or a swap between him and THJ, very similar players, I would say, in terms of how they're going to fit on the Mavs. He's an upgrade. He just clearly is. He gives you at least some defense, and he's a better shooter, so that to me is not even close. But where I think this could potentially work is if he comes off the bench. Now, he's going to be a starter. That's not guaranteed to last. And if it lasts because it's working, I'm all for it. But I think the defensive side of the ball may hurt. Now, if you're getting, you're scoring more and you're winning games, sure. Now, as the game gets closer in clutch lineups, are you going to roll out Kyrie, Klay, and Luka? If the defense isn't there, I don't know. So we're going to have to see how that works. But for this deal and this fit, I love it. Now, they traded away 2 second-round picks, plus Josh Green, for Klay Thompson, and I think this is a great deal. I think they traded away 2 second-round picks, so I think so. I think that's the math in this. But yeah, losing Green, a young player who's shown flashes, but he's shown flashes for the last 3 years, I'm totally fine with moving off him. He was one of those, energetic guys you can get off the bench, but I think with the Quentin Grimes trade, that is potentially a swap there, and that's also a lesser contract for Quentin Grimes. And so you filled that role pretty much, and, you're saying, what, Josh Green was a 40% three-point shooter, yeah, on like 2 attempts a game. So he wasn't necessarily a huge factor for the Mavericks. And so I like that trade plus 2 second-round picks to get a guy like Klay Thompson, who is a boom potential on this team. Yes, there is some bust potential, but again, I think, if anything, his floor for this team is a 6th man, and his ceiling is, I want to say like a 5th. A ceiling could be an 18 points per game shooter off of great efficiency. So I love this signing. It really expands their offensive game, I think, especially if they're able to run some action in terms of off-the-ball screens and stuff like that. I think this is a huge signing for the Mavericks, and they have some left-over room to sign a backup point guard, like I said earlier. And you can see all of the dive deeps. I think my guy would be Dennis Smith Jr., who was a former Maverick, a more defensive-centered guy, which I think could play great off the bench, especially if you run a starting lineup with Luka, Kyrie, and Klay. If you sub a Luka or a Kyrie out, fit Dennis Smith Jr. to guard the point guards on this team, I think that would be a great fit. So diving into more of the Klay Thompson signing, I think the biggest takeaway is people acknowledge Dallas as a contender. The players do, at least. And there was this huge stigma around Luka not being desirable amongst players to play with. That is going clearly off. Klay Thompson came here to win. He chose a bigger contract with the Lakers and other teams, allegedly, according to reports. And so this $50 million for 3 years, I think, is going to be, hugely successful. Now, do I think they're going to go on and win the NBA Finals? I think they have the team to go back to the NBA Finals. Obviously, you got to look at matchups and stuff like that. Teams like Denver have gotten worse, while other teams like OKC, the number 1 seed, got better and deeper. So it's going to be matchup-based, especially when you get in the playoffs. You have teams like the Timberwolves I forgot the rookie that they drafted, but they are still a young team. They did lose Kyle Anderson to the Warriors in free agency, so that could play a huge role in the regular season. But here is my outlook for the Mavs going forward, especially in a regular season sense. I think with their current team, even without the Klay Thompson signing, I think they were built to have regular season success because they can defend. Even with the loss of Derrick Jones Jr., I think they can still defend, and they can score easy buckets in terms of with their big men. If Derek Lively can repeat or at least take a little bit of a step up, that's huge. And Daniel Gafford, I think, is going to still be productive in that 5 role. So their bigs are set, and when you have a guy like Luka Doncic, who is one of the best passers, best open guy finders in the NBA, and you add that with a guy like Klay Thompson, who can, consistently shoot. He shot 38% from three this year, which isn't elite, but in terms of his other percentages, that could be a huge game changer for games that a Luka sits out or a Kyrie sits out in terms of injuries or even just game management in that point. That could be huge. But also, this team is built on defense, and they have one of the best players in the NBA. So I predict them to have at least a top 3 record in the Western Conference, even though it is a tough but conference. It is tough as nails, as it always is, but I think that you're going to see some fall off with some teams. So I think that leaves the door open for the Mavericks to get a top 3 seed. They still have a move to make in terms of a backup point guard. We'll have to see how the roster breaks out, but this is my quick instant reactions for the first couple of days of the free agency. We still have summer league to get into, OMAC season. I'm excited, and you have some free agents still to sign, like DeMar DeRozan and stuff like that. So a lot to happen in this NBA season. You have the Olympics coming up. You have Luka playing in Slovenia. It's going to be an exciting time here as NBA fans, as we're kind of in that desolate area of the year, as you still got MLB, but NFL is not in action yet, and the NBA is in its lingo period. So I want to thank you guys for watching/listening. Let me know what I should look at next or talk about next here on The Whistle. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.